Or are you gonna manslaughter him? 'Cause I don't think I can watch. Hello everyone, welcome to episode number 97 of Movies Are Awesome, the show all about ghost hunting. My name is Nathan Pottle, and thank you for joining me today. And first off, I gotta say, sorry I didn't do an episode last week, and that's on me. That's my fault, just because I didn't do one. I have no excuse. There's no excuses. I just didn't do one. I'm back now though, and today I am talking about movies that should never be remade. Now, for the most part, I feel that pretty much every movie is up for grabs and can be remade at any time. I'm not super into the belief that there are just all of these movies back there should never be remade ever. I don't really buy into that, because there are some really great remakes out there. However, that being said, there are specific few movies out there that I think are good enough or on that level or so unique that I feel they need to just be left as they are, enjoyed as they are, and not remade in any kind of way. I have 5 movies that I'm going to talk about today that I think should never be remade. Obviously, The Lord of the Rings, I think, is perfect and should never be remade, but I excluded it from the list, so I'm not going to be talking about Lord of the Rings today, even though I think for sure, don't remake it, because those movies are just the best. I'm not talking about that today, though. We are talking about these 5 movies. Why don't I just start right into it here? I've got nothing else to say off the top. So I'm going to talk about these in order of release date, and I think I'll be avoiding spoilers for the most part. So don't worry about anything like that. The first movie is from all the way back in 1941, and that is Citizen Kane. Now, I've talked about this movie on the show before. It's pretty great, written and directed and starring Orson Welles, and I think this movie, much like a lot of the other ones, the reason that I feel that these movies are unremakeable, if that's the term I want to use, I feel that they're unable to be remade primarily because there's 1 or 2 really incredible performances that I don't think could be duplicated or replicated in any way. It was just the role for this person, and I don't think anyone else is able to take that away from them. In this case, it is Orson Welles as Charles Foster Kane. I think his performance is absolutely brilliant, especially because he plays the character at different ages and different stages of his life, and I love this movie. I think it's so great. There's something about the style of this film that they just don't make movies this way anymore. When you watch it, it just feels like something completely unto itself, and a lot of things have copied and pulled inspiration from this movie in the years since it has come out, but for the most part, it stands above the rest. This is one of those movies that when they're talking about the greatest movie of all time, this is often in the conversation. The cinematography, the way that this movie looks, is really great and really dynamic. There's some really great shots here that use a really extreme depth of field, and you have a lot of different things in focus to look at one time. So it's one of those movies that you go back to again and again and watch it, and you pick up different things because you're looking at different things within the frame. Maybe I should talk about the story of this movie and what it's actually about, so that I'm not just sitting here saying, oh yeah, it's really good, you should go watch it. Basically, the movie opens with Charles Foster Kane at the end of his life, and he utters the word rosebud on his deathbed, and then he dies. And now Charles Foster Kane is this newspaper tycoon and just this charismatic guy, and he was a governor and did all of these different things. He was one of the most interesting men to have ever lived. And basically, he was the most interesting man, but also one of the most mysterious, and the story follows this newspaper writer who's trying to write an article based on Charles Foster Kane's life, and he goes through, and we see kind of a chronicling of his life and finding out more about him, and trying to find out what is the meaning behind his final utterance. I think it's a really great movie. I've got it on Blu-ray here at home. I've watched it a bunch of times. It's really great. I don't know what else to say. And if they were to announce any kind of remake of Citizen Kane, I don't think I would be on board for it. I wouldn't want to watch it because I already have a perfect version of that movie. Why make another one when I already have one that is exactly what I want out of it. So the first one on my list is Citizen Kane. The next one is from 1965, and that is The Sound of Music. The Sound of Music, I recently rewatched this movie a couple of weeks ago when Christopher Plummer passed away. In honor of his memory, we decided to sit down and watch The Sound of Music. And this movie, man, I forgot just how magnificent The Sound of Music is. Everything from its breathtaking visuals to Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer's performance, they're just fantastic in it. This movie just has everything that I need in a great movie. And I know a couple people who don't really like The Sound of Music, and that's fine. I can understand. It's kind of long, and it has a lot of things happening, but I think that this movie is pretty much pitch perfect. It's exactly what they were going for. It's very entertaining. It's an interesting story, and like I said, Julie Andrews and Christopher Plummer are just fantastic in it, and just like how I said, Orson Welles kind of cements the performance into Citizen Kane, Julie Andrews absolutely cements herself as Maria in The Sound of Music. Now, this is only her second movie that she was ever in. She was first in Mary Poppins, who she was discovered by Walt Disney when she was working on Broadway, came over, was in Mary Poppins, and then a year or two after was in The Sound of Music. So her first two performances that she ever gave on screen are two of the most iconic films ever made. So that just goes to show how supremely talented Julie Andrews is. It is also worth noting that The Sound of Music won Best Picture in the year that it came out. It's not the only one on this list to have done that, so I've got a couple others that I'm going to talk about that also won Best Picture. But it's one of those movies, that everyone is familiar with and everybody knows, and I can't imagine them remaking it at all. It was just made in an era that really excelled at making musicals, and we don't get a lot of live action musicals these days anymore. We had La La Land, which came out in 2016, and anything else really mainstream, nothing else comes to mind right off the bat. And if they do make musicals these days, and if musicals do get made, normally the musical sequence are made as more of like a spoof and not really taking itself as seriously, or if a musical comes out, it's generally animated. So The Sound of Music is really just a product of its time, and I don't think that that same magic could possibly be recreated in any sense in our modern day. Even with all of our advancements in technology and how great we can make things look, I just don't think it's possible to recreate what The Sound of Music was able to create in 1965. If you are not familiar, The Sound of Music is the story of Maria. I think I said Mary earlier. I did not mean that. Her name is Maria. They sing a whole song at the very beginning of the movie called How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria? So it's the story of Maria, and she's in the abbey. She's going to be a nun, but then she is sent instead to go be a governess for this family. And the dad is part of the military, or he's an ex-captain, and it's her job to raise these kids, to be their governess. And she comes into their lives and completely changes it forever because she's just so whimsical and lovely and everybody loves her. And she just completely changes their lives and integrates music into their lives and teaches them how to sing and how to perform. And then there's stuff with Nazis and World War II, and this movie is kind of based off of stuff that actually happened. There was an actual family, the Von Trapp family, I believe is their name. So there's all of that going on between World War II stuff and music performing stuff. So there's some lighthearted stuff and there's more emotional heavy stuff. And man, it is really just a well put together film. And most people who I know who have seen it really, really enjoy it. One of my sister-in-laws, this is her favorite movie, and I can't blame anyone for picking this as their favorite movie because it's excellent. I do believe in total it won 5 Academy Awards, one of them being Best Picture. I think Julie Andrews maybe won for her performance. I'm not 100% sure. But the next movie on my list from 1972 also won Best Picture, and that is The Godfather. Now, The Godfather is one of those ones that's also talked about as the greatest movie ever made, and I feel it's another one of those ones that is such a product of its time. It feels like a 70s gangster film. It was groundbreaking at the time. Kind of like how we had a lot of musicals in the 50s and 60s, the 70s and onward kind of started this era of gangster films. And right up until the 90s, we were getting gangster films from Francis Ford Coppola and from Martin Scorsese and all these different directors who were just making gangster movies, and a lot of it stems from The Godfather. Now, much like with Citizen Kane and The Sound of Music, of course, there is a singular performance that cements the whole movie, and that is Marlon Brando as Don Corleone, the Godfather himself. He is just so fascinating. His performance is just compelling. Your eyes are glued to the screen whenever he's on. The way that he talks and his mannerisms, everything about this character is just magnificent. And this performance did win the Academy Award, and there's a whole thing about how Marlon Brando declined his Academy Award when he won because he had some political affiliations that I don't remember the exact details of the story. It was something about the treatment of Native American people, and I don't know the exact details, so I don't want to get into it. But basically, he turned down even attending the awards. He wasn't there, and he sent a Native American woman up onto stage to receive the award for him, and she gave a speech. I've watched it before, but I don't remember the exact details. You can find it on YouTube. It's interesting stuff, but the point is the performance is magnificent, and even Al Pacino, who plays his son Michael, is really good in the movie as well. It's just a fascinating movie about a crime family and how they operate and warring between other crime families and the descent of the character of Michael and his becoming the new Godfather and being kind of set up for that life even though he doesn't really want that for himself, and just kind of seeing how their lives go. It's really interesting, fascinating stuff. It's an excellent movie. It's so iconic at this point. I don't think that it could ever be redone. Now, unlike the other movies on my list, this is the only one that has sequels. The Godfather Part 2 is also incredible, and it also won Best Picture. Godfather Part 3 is less good in comparison to the first two. In comparison to the first two, I could describe it as a bad movie, but as a movie on its own, I think it's just fine. There's nothing special about it. Obviously, The Godfather 1 and 2 are among the greatest films ever made, so just watch those ones. Or if you're a completionist, I guess you could watch all of them for the sake of watching all of them, but I don't think it's worth watching. Especially after, like I said, how high the bar is set by the previous two films. So, The Godfather, and as an extension, The Godfather Part 2, I think should never be remade. The next one on my list, it's another Best Picture winner. It came out in 1994, and that is Forrest Gump. And obviously, the performance by Tom Hanks in this movie is great as Forrest Gump himself, where whether he's playing ping pong or running or, teaching Elvis how to dance, he just does all of the things in this movie. And the way that he just plots his way through history. Now, the story of Forrest Gump, if you're not familiar, it's this man named Forrest who's a little simple-minded, and he just kind of waltzes his way through American history and changes and alters things and kind of influences American history and culture just by accident. And it's him telling his story of all the things that he's done, how he helped invest in Apple, and how he met a couple of different presidents, and how he started a shrimp company, and how he just did all of these things. He fought in Vietnam. He just has been everywhere and done everything, and he's just living his life. He doesn't really understand how big of a deal he is, but he loves Jenny, and that's all that really matters to him, really. And it's a really interesting movie. I find it fascinating. I think its story has a bit of timelessness to it, especially some of the things when Forrest Gump is a young child. Some of the stuff that comes up in there is stuff that a lot of people can relate to, or at least a lot of people can imagine that they relate to. There's just all of these different elements to the story and to Forrest's life and to his friend Jenny and Lieutenant Dan even. Lieutenant Dan has a remarkable story arc, and I love his story and his progression as a character from where we see him when he first shows up in Vietnam to where we see him at the very end of the movie as a business partner to Forrest to have slight spoilers, I'm sorry, for a movie that is, over 20 years old. I think the story of Lieutenant Dan is one of the best parts of Forrest Gump. Obviously, like I said, Tom Hanks's performance is also a really great part. The timelessness of the story, just the endearing nature of Forrest Gump himself. I have all the good things to say about Forrest Gump. It's an amazing movie, and I can't imagine it being remade. Looks like I'm going through these kind of fast. I only have one left, so why don't I just get right into it? This one is from 1997, and it is a movie called Life is Beautiful. Now, Life is Beautiful is an Italian film, so the whole thing is in Italian. You have to read the subtitles if you don't understand the language, so I'm sorry about that. I don't understand the language. I only speak English, so I had to read the subtitles. But this movie was just so powerful. It's the story about a Jewish librarian in World War II, and him and his son are just trying to survive. This character, who's played by Roberto Benigni, he is just the most charismatic character I may have ever seen in a movie. He's just so likable and so charming and so fun, and everything that he says and everything that he does is all about the joy. Like with the title Life is Beautiful, even though this takes place during World War II and he's a Jewish character and all of the hardships that he's facing, he takes the time to make life fun, to make life enjoyable for his son, to always see the shining spots in everything. And the reason I chose this movie to not ever be remade, because a lot of times American studios will take foreign films and make American versions of it. Great examples of that is The Magnificent Seven is a remake of Seven Samurai, which I enjoyed that original Magnificent Seven, but Seven Samurai is so much better. Another example is The Departed is a remake of a movie called Infernal Affairs. Now, I actually haven't seen Infernal Affairs, but I hear it's amazing. And I really enjoy The Departed as well. But this one, Life is Beautiful, oh man, it's a heavy, emotional movie. But I've only seen it once, but I can't stop thinking about it. I watched it a year or two ago, was the first time I watched it, and I just haven't been able to stop thinking about it, and I've been wanting to rewatch it since. I haven't had the opportunity, but I would like to go and revisit Life is Beautiful, because it's just, it's hard to find words for a movie like this, because it is so note perfect in everything that it's trying to do. It did not win Best Picture. It was nominated, but it didn't win Best Foreign Language Film, so I guess that's something. It's a runner-up, I guess. The actor Roberto Benigni, he did win the Academy Award for his performance in the film, so at least that. There was some real recognition for this movie when it came out. Now, granted, I was only 4 years old when this movie came out, so I didn't know about it. I didn't know about it until, 2 years ago when I first watched it. So, but it's just one of those ones that just sticks with you, I imagine a great number of you have not watched Life is Beautiful, and I would highly recommend checking it out. Find a copy of it and watch it somehow. Really give this movie your full attention, because it is just so endearing. It's so endearing, and I would hate to see any kind of Americanized version of this movie, because what we have already been given by the Italian filmmakers of this film, it's excellent. I have nothing else to say about that. It's wonderful, and don't remake it. Please do not remake Life is Beautiful. That's it for my list today. Wow, that's a quick one. So why don't I run through those one more time? Movies that should never be remade: Citizen Kane from 1941, The Sound of Music from 1965, The Godfather 1972, Forrest Gump 1994, and Life is Beautiful from 1997. So that is it for my list today. What I would like to ask you guys is, what movie do you think should never ever be remade? I would love to know what you think. Please feel free to let me know. You can reach out to me on social media. You can find me on Twitter at Pottle Nathan, and you can find the show on Instagram at Movies Are Awesome Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please feel free to subscribe to the show. You can do that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and a whole bunch of other places. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It really means a lot to me, especially that we're getting close to episode 100. I've got something special planned for episode 100. I'm very excited to finally get there. Also, we're getting close to the release of Raya and the Last Dragon, so I'm going to be getting new movies to start reviewing. Things like Raya and the Last Dragon, Justice League will be coming out, Kong versus Godzilla, a whole bunch of stuff to be looking forward to here on the show, and I'm looking forward to it as well. So thank you for joining me for that, and as always, if you have nothing else to do, go watch more movies.